And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
Yeah, friends come in handy, but family is family.
And welcome to the show. I'm Zach Spencer, and we're talking about wills and estate law. And we have in studio today Alyssa Lockhart, partner at McQuarrie LLP, and Leah Donaldson, senior associate at McQuarrie LLP. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we're going to do things a little bit differently today because for the first half, we're going to focus on wills and estates. And then in the second half, Leah, we're going to do wills and estates and family law.
Yeah.
Which is because you wear two hats.
I do.
So explain that. What do you do at McQuarrie LLP?
So I practice family law litigation.
So that's when people are getting divorced.
Yeah, that's a breakdown of marital relationships or
that's the nice way you
law.
put it. I work in the breakdown of family relationships.
She's a mechanic.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also practice estate litigation, which
Right.
is the dispute side of wills and estates.
So how did you come to those two parts of law?
Well, I would say they definitely were the most interesting to me. I articled with McQuarrie Hunter right at the beginning of my career.
You mean McQuarrie LLP?
Sorry, McQuarrie LLP. Yeah.
She's still correct. She did article with
That's true.
McQuarrie
It was
Hunter.
called McQuarrie Hunter at that time.
You see, we have a little running joke that whoever says the previous name has to put a quarter in the tip jar.
So I owe a quarter already.
All right.
So I articled in 2008. I was called to the bar in 2009. And those two areas really stuck out for me initially right off the bat as my most interested area.
Is it because it's the litigation part, like the going to court part? Do you
I
like
do
that?
enjoy going to court. Yes. I enjoy sort of crafting arguments and appearing in court. I find it, every case is different. You never know what's going to happen when you go in a courtroom. It's exciting. It's very interesting. And that advocacy side is huge for me. It's my favorite part of the job.
All right. So, Alyssa, how did you get to law and why wills and estates?
Well, I was an HR consultant actually for a number of years, and I knew what I was doing, but no one ever listened to me. So I thought, well, I'll go to law school so that I can be the employment lawyer, and then they will listen to me. And in law school, I discovered that as much as I enjoyed employment and HR issues, I truly, really resonated with the corporate aspects of the practice of law. And so I did get out and I did practice a little bit in employment law for the first 4 years, but then I transitioned to a solicitor's practice in order to do corporate work for those companies that I was doing employment law for. And then as a corporate lawyer, I started seeing more and more need for succession planning. How do we move those corporate assets, our family enterprise assets, to the hands of the next generation or to the hands of a purchaser when we're ready to retire? And estate planning just made so much sense to me. And I've been doing that for about 12, 13 years now.
Isn't it funny when you look back at your career path at what you started doing has nothing to do with what you do now?
Absolutely.
Is that true for both of you?
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's the next step? You think this is where you want to...
Who knows?
So with wills and estates, obviously this is your line of work and you see people come across your office all the time. What is the common mistake that people make, and why should they have somebody like yourself look at their will and estate and help them plan it out?
I think that a common misconception is that you don't need a lawyer unless it's complicated. Mm-hmm. A common mistake is to perceive our situation as simple when it's not. So, for instance, my husband and I have 3 girls. We're raising them together, and we want to leave everything to one another and divide between the 3 girls when the last of us dies. Pretty simple. Why would I need a lawyer? Mm-hmm. We're actually a blended family, and if my husband were to die first, that would be fine. All 3 girls are biologically mine. But if I die first and leave everything to him, the oldest daughter, who's not biologically his, would not have an entitlement against his estate if he later wrote her out of the will. So her legal entitlement to a share in my assets upon death would change after my passing. So really, really what we need to think about is, are our circumstances as simple as our daily life is? And would a lawyer complicate it, or is a lawyer going to simplify something that we don't even see the pitfalls in?
Well, that's the thing is you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Now, when you have sort of touching on your situation, so you have a family and they have 2 kids, and then you get a divorce, and then one of the goes on and remarries, but they don't have any children. They're just, they've got their money that they brought with them from that first marriage, and then they live for another 30, 40 years. So when that person passes away, does the money automatically go to their spouse? And then do those kids ever see that money? There's all those situations, right?
Well, the Wills, Estates, Succession Act, which we refer to as WESA, provides that all of our beneficiaries, and that includes our children and our spouses, so not our stepchildren and not kindly neighbors that take care of us, not cousins who have always been around, and not our parents, have an ability to at least apply to vary the terms of our will if they didn't think we were fair with them.
Because that new marriage might have been together for 30 years. So
Right.
if one of them passes away, you would think, well, all the money automatically goes to the surviving spouse, right?
Possibly. What's the genesis of the asset base? Did I bring all of the assets to the relationship and share them with my spouse? That might say 2 things. It might say that those assets ought to be at least attributed somewhat to my first family where I generated them, and my children should have a share of those. It might also say I clearly supported my spouse. My spouse has a need, and I have an obligation following death to support him or her. So what do you think about that, Leah?
Yeah, it's really dependent on circumstances. And unfortunately, that's sort of what you need someone to help you anticipate, because you're not necessarily thinking about what would happen 30 years down the road. And so the instance that you're talking about would be it's the long-term relationship. And maybe there was a small amount of assets at the beginning of the relationship, but that second spouse built up the majority of that asset base so that on their death, really that small amount of assets that was there for the first children is nothing in comparison to the amount that it's grown during the second relationship.
So would those children have any access to that larger pot?
They always do, yeah. So under WESA, so there's a statutory right, we call it, so basically a legal right, no matter what, to apply to vary. And there's a select group of people that can do that. And that's part of the issue about the blended family, is that stepchildren are not included in that.
So let's just talk about WESA, because I've learned through doing these shows that it's fairly new.
2014, the end of March, actually. Yeah.
So just a few years old.
3 years old.
So what does that mean for somebody listening today, that they have this new statute? What does that mean?
Well, it means that if they had developed their understanding of how estates work and estate law works over the course of the last many decades, they could be out of date in their understanding. For instance, now if you have a will and then you get married, does that will fail by virtue of the marriage, or does that will still stand? Does our law now say that if I want to include my spouse, I will do so? But if I didn't include my spouse, if I forgot to rewrite my will, my spouse is actually not included and will have to litigate, or will have to hope that my children are adults and are capable of being generous and gifting. So we can create a lot of challenges for ourselves by understanding the law the way it used to be.
So how many wills do you think are out there that would get caught up in the new rules? Like, so you're saying that all wills pre-2014 probably need to be updated?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that prior to 2014, the law said one thing about the situation that I described, and now it says the opposite. And so if you understood it to be that, oh, well, my marriage nullified my will, therefore I don't need a will because clearly I'm just intestate. That's not the case any longer. We also changed things on intestacy in WESA, so we see a lot of modernization. People who heard that, well, if you die without a will, your spouse only gets the first $65,000 of your assets and then a third or whatever of the remainder. And people have different percentages. Some some come in and say, and then 80% of the remainder. And I have no idea where these things come from, but we talk amongst ourselves. We talk about death. We talk about our assets. It's what we do over the water cooler at work and over the barbecue fence in the backyard at home. So people have ideas, and I would say that a lot of them are outdated. So it's worth sitting down and talking to somebody about whether your documents are still going to work for you, or whether there's other aspects of the law that have changed.
And then if they don't work out, then you call Leah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think certain people's estate plan will work just fine, despite the fact that there was a change in the law. But you don't know until you have a lawyer look at it, unfortunately. And you don't want to find that out, or your family members don't want to find that out after you're gone and it's too late to fix the problem.
All right. When we come back, we're going to get into a whole bunch of other topics, including the two hats that Leah wears, which is family law and wills and estates. So that's coming up in the second half of the show. When we come back next, we'll get into executors and more on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.